I want to ask you a question, and it's so basic you've probably never even thought to ask it. Do things actually need a cause? Now, it sounds like a simple yes or no question, right? But the answer, well, it kind of pulls apart our entire understanding of reality itself.
Think about this. You walk into a dark room, you flip a switch. The light comes on. Why? It seems like the most obvious question in the world with an equally obvious answer.
I mean, it's cause and effect, right? Flicking the switch is the cause, the light turning on is the effect. It's a simple scientific fact. We see these little connections everywhere, all day long. They pretty much form the basic grammar of how we see the world. Okay, but let's take a step back from this one light switch. A big step back. Let's zoom out to, well, everything. Is it some kind of unbreakable law of the universe that every single thing that happens must have a cause? Or is that just a really convenient assumption that we make to get by? Now that is the real question.
So before we can even begin to answer that, we have to get really clear on what we mean by that word need. Are we talking about something that we need to make sense of things, or something the universe itself absolutely has to obey?
And this is where we hit a really crucial fork in the road. On the one hand, you've got what's called an epistemic need. That's all about us, about our knowledge. We need the idea of a cause just to explain the world, to understand it. But then, on the other hand, you have metaphysical necessity. And that's a much, much bigger claim. That's saying that reality itself has a non-negotiable rule. Every event must have a cause. And those two ideas are definitely not the same thing.
All right, so let's start by building the case for causes. Why are we so deeply convinced that this metaphysical rule is real? Well, the arguments are actually incredibly powerful, and they feel really, really intuitive.
You can think of it like there are four main pillars holding this belief up. It all starts with our simple, everyday experience. Things don't just pop into existence out of nowhere. That feeling then gets formalized into a big philosophical idea, the principle of sufficient reason. That principle then becomes the absolute bedrock of science. And ultimately, believing in causes just seems to make the world a whole lot simpler and less chaotic.
So let's zero in on that second pillar for a second. The principle of sufficient reason, or PSR for short, is this classic idea from philosophers like Leibniz, and what it basically argues is that the universe is fundamentally understandable. It's not just random or arbitrary. For anything that exists or for anything that happens, there has to be an explanation. Nothing just happens for no reason at all.
And you can see why this is just absolutely fundamental for science, right? The entire scientific project is basically one giant hunt for causes. Whether you're talking about medicine or engineering, the whole game is to find a cause so you can predict an effect or to see an effect and figure out what caused it. Without that basic assumption, science as we know it would just grind to a halt.
Okay, that all sounds pretty solid. It's useful, it's intuitive, it powers science, but what if this powerful, incredibly useful assumption isn't actually a fundamental law of reality? Let's flip to the other side of the debate and see how this whole structure can start to unravel. This is where the philosopher David Hume just throws a wrench in the whole machine. He made this bombshell argument that we never actually see causation. Think about it. We see one billiard ball roll and hit another. Then we see the second one move. We see that sequence happen over and over and over, and our mind just fills in the blank. It infers that there's some necessary connection. But Hume's point was, you never actually observe the connection itself. All you see is the two events happening together constantly.
Hume's skepticism really cracked the door open for some other pretty big doubts. For example, modern physics suggests that down at the quantum level, some things, like radioactive decay, might be truly random, not caused in the way we normally think. Then there's the philosophical idea of brute facts, the possibility that some things just are, and there's no deeper why. And then you have the really mind-bending one, the regress puzzle.
I mean, just think about it. If everything needs a cause, then what caused the very first event? The Big Bang.
And if you manage to come up with an answer for that, okay, fine. But then what caused that?
You see the problem, right? You're either trapped in this infinite, endless chain of what caused that, or you have to stop somewhere with a first cause that was itself uncaused. Either way, the hard and fast rule that everything needs a cause gets broken. So we're kind of stuck. A simple yes, everything has a cause, leads to this weird puzzle. But a simple no feels wrong and makes science difficult. So where does that leave us?
Well, modern philosophy has tried to find some more nuanced answers that live somewhere in the middle. This has led to some really clever ways of redefining what a cause even is. For example, a probabilistic view says a cause doesn't guarantee an outcome, it just makes it more likely, like how smoking increases your chances of getting cancer. A counterfactual view says a cause is just a difference maker. If it hadn't happened, the effect wouldn't have happened. And then there's the Kantian view, which argues that causation isn't even out there in the world at all. It's a piece of software built into our minds, a lens we literally can't take off. So after all that, after looking at the arguments for, the arguments against, and all these clever workarounds, where do we land? Is there a final verdict on this? Well, the truth is, we're kind of left with this fascinating tension. Two things that seem to be true at the same time. On the one hand, the whole idea of causation is an absolutely essential tool. It's indispensable for science, for technology, for just getting through your day. We really can't function without it. But on the other hand, as a strict, unbreakable law of the universe, well, its status is still very much unproven. There are some really powerful reasons to be skeptical.
And that leaves us with this one final, massive question to chew on. Is causation a real force, something literally woven into the fabric of the cosmos? Or is it the ultimate tool our brains use to make sense of it all, the thing that turns a bunch of random data points into a story that we can actually understand? The answer isn't settled, and honestly, just asking the question changes how you see everything.